Hello everybody, and welcome to another PvP Academy video. Today we'll be talking about my favorite my favorite school, Myth. We'll be talking about its strengths, its weaknesses, what spells are good, which spells are bad, and why they're bad, and what the KingsIsle can do to fix those spells to make Myth a more balanced school and have a better time doing something other than its current strat. We will also talk about what its current strat is, and yeah. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing that we're going to talk about is Myth's identity. Now, as you can see here, Myth's identity is the Trap School, with the sub-identities of Dots and Shields. Now, this is an okay identity, as it is a buffing identity, and generally buff identities are better. Storm is a really good school thanks to the fact that it can buff into big hits. Now, there is a slight problem with traps and why they're not as good. They're valued less, so it is harder for Myth that doesn't hit as hard in the first place to do a similar strategy as Storm in just buff hit. Now, we're going to talk quickly about Myth's counter schools. Just like all schools, Myth has two counter schools. In this case, its counter schools are Life and Fire, so Dots and Hots. These, Fire is not the best one to have as a counter school at the moment, as Fires are most of the queue and the best school in the current meta. Life is also not a good one to have as a counter school, as lives have a tendency of jading, which is when they just heal for the sake of healing and they are not going to actually do damage. Now, this is a very toxic playstyle, and not all lives are doing this, but it is really hard on a Myth to fight against that. They also just straight up counter traps, so you can't trap against them. Now, Myth also has some strengths. It has strengths versus Ice and Death. Again, one of them is a really good school. Ice is an okay school at the moment, but it is a really good school to counter, as this means Myth has a counter strategy to every single debuff outside of auras. Now, we don't know how polymorphs and global spells are going to affect Myth at the moment. Myth is going to have access to both of them, but they may or may not provide other forms of weakening of Myth's damage power or not. But thanks to Myth countering these two schools and all of the debuffs, there is a high chance of Myths to do a strategy known as PvE, and this is actually shown in what spells are currently good for Myth. Now, while most schools have a plethora of spells that are good for going, Myth unfortunately only has 3. That is Fantastic Djinn, Dropbear's Fury, and Stone Colossus. The reason that these spells are so good on a Myth are they are either a counter, a clear spell, or a base hit. The current strategy that most Myths use is Blade into a Fantastic Djinn. Most of the time this means 3 to 4 blades, a few traps, and a Fantastic Djinn will kill. Without a Gambit, if you can get a Gambit, it will kill with maybe a blade or a trap less. Now, if you try to shield against Myth, Dropbear's Fury will clear 4 of those for damage, and Stone does the same thing, but for weaknesses. So, debuffing a Myth is not easy to do. You have to do both to actually get it out. And as of recent, most myths will carry the fire spell Glimpse of Infinity to counter shields and weaknesses while setting up even more buffs, or will carry Fire Elf to clear out a shield and a weakness right before a Fantastic Djinn, without removing their own buffs. So the real only spell that most myths are going to use is their blades, their traps, and then Fantastic Djinn. Now, Myth has a lot of bad spells, and there's bad spells for two different reasons. The first reason are bomb dots, and I'm going to talk about why bomb dots are so bad, and why specifically some of these ones are bad. Basilisk clears 8 shields, 4 shields. It's a really good shield counter spell, and if it wasn't a double bomb dot, it would be really, really good. Now, the double bomb dot makes it so much worse. If you didn't know, bombs wait to be detonated for a number of rounds. So Basilisk is 6, Myth King Arturius is 5, Hero of Chrysalis is 5, Snake, Charmer, and Orthrus are both 4. Now, that means your opponent has that many turns to counter it. And with cheap counters being an option for 2 dots and 1 dot, unlike for 3 and more dots, these spells more often than not will do 0 damage, unless of course you can instantly detonate them with something like Apocalypse or Troll. If you're trying to use a Raging Bull detonate, Raging Bull will detonate them, but it will not deal the additional damage, at least at the moment of this video being released. So you don't get the extra value, so it's actually worse to do that. Now, there are some ways of fixing these. The first one, and something that KingsIsle has said that they're looking into, is a more or less bomb pity system, is what I'm going to call it. This means each round, it's going to get a percentage of its damage added onto it, so that if you counter it, it will deal that damage at that moment. Basically, setting off the bomb early for less damage, rather than letting it go and collect all of its damage. This is going to let them actually deal damage 100% of the time, which makes them on par or not with regular dots instead of being a bomb. Though you can just ignore countering them and kill faster than them, and that's not going to be the best. The other way, and it's a simpler fix, is shorten the amount of time for bombs to detonate. Bombs are a cool mechanic, they go along with the trap identity, but it doesn't give you enough, they give you too much time to counter them, and that's what one of the main problems is. If Basilisk 6 was actually 3, or King Arts 5 was a 3, basically making them 3s and 4s give you less time to counter them. Tuaret is less of an option because it would bomb on the turn that the Tuaret would clear. If it's a 4, if it's a 3, you basically need to have those life pips set up for a Tuaret anyways. If it's a 3, you also would need to start getting pips for a Stormzilla or a Tuaret immediately, otherwise it is going to deal the damage. And it will be much, much better. Now, there are other bad spells, and I will talk about them here. And these ones are bad for other reasons. Specifically, these top 4 are all trap spells. 2 of them are trap gambits, 2 of them are trap conditionals, and I'll talk about why they're bad. Medusa and Celestial Calendar both have the same problem of they gambit traps after they hit. Understandably, they need to do this because gambiting the traps for the Medusa anyways first would be a bad idea. So Medusa is just bad because it's not dealing enough damage for what it's really worth. Now, Celestial Calendar, that has another option. Most traps gambiting away the traps for the pips first and then hitting, personally, I do not think would be a problem. I do not know why it is set up this way. Sure, using those traps is good for the damage, but I do personally believe that if it was flopped, it would be better because you could spam it as a actual base hit much more readily, and then it wouldn't be as big of an issue of, well, do I want the extra damage or do I want the pips? Cyclops' conditional is basically used by its conditional. Cyclops sets up traps for having a dot on your opponent. This causes a problem of it sets up 2 traps. One of them is going to get used by the dot if it's a regular dot. Both of them if it's a regular dot actually, and you don't have a follow-up hit to the Cyclops. If it's a bomb dot, it's guaranteed using one of them if you don't use both of them first. So it's wasting its own conditional, and that causes it to be bad. Tasselworm Terror is bad for another reason. Traps are universal traps. Universal traps outside of balance are not good. It means that any move that you do is going to trigger them. Any move that your opponent does that does self-damage is going to use them. Now, to fix Tasselworm Terror, it's really simple. Just make it a chromatic trap, then it would be a really good spell, and a lot of myths, I think, would run it then. The other 3 spells have a weakness for other reasons. Myth is the trap school, and double hits and traps do not play well together. Toth is a good spell, don't get me wrong. It deals a lot of damage for 7 pips, and it gets around a shield. But you cannot buff it in the way that Myth want to be buffing to use more of their hit in a variety of spells, because those traps are going to get used on the first hit, and unless of course you have double trapped every single trap, that second hit is not going to be buffed by any traps that you use, just the first one. Minnow has a similar problem. At least the top path Minnow here. It's using all of your traps on that first hit instead of the second one, forcing you to have to blade to actually buff both hits. And blading is not Myth's identity. Myth doesn't touch the blade schools, and it shouldn't need to blade just to be a good school. Minnow bottom path, its conditional is basically useless. It clears 4 shields for trap. Sounds really good for a school that wants to buff and use a big hit. But it hits first before it clears them, and it is a double hit still. Meaning it's going to break 2 shields anyways if they have double shielded, and so if they have just used myth shields, or they haven't used something like a couple tri-shields, more times than not, it's going to break the shields that you're trying to clear anyways, and then clear nothing, and you've just done a 5-pip hit that's into 2 shields and has wasted buffs. To fix this, if they could make it clear first, hit, and then put the traps, that would work. They also can't just flip the order of it, because then it would clear 4 shields, and use 2 of its own traps to do its hit. So then at that point, it would just be easier to hit and make 2 traps. It will probably be doing pretty much the same thing. And that is why those spells are so bad. So that is the School of Myth in a nutshell, as of currently, for PvP. I do hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Remember, all glory to the School of Myth. Thank you, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.